The owners of car dealerships are thieving parasites that are corrupting our great and noble republic for their own naked self-interest. I apologize for the use of hyperbole there, but I was told that if I didn't have a hook within the first 7 seconds of my video, people would get bored. And they would leave. And in my defense, I wasn't exaggerating too much, as you'll see shortly. Because the basic problem with car dealerships is that they got the laws changed to benefit themselves at the expense of basically everybody else. Now, before we get into the laws that they wrote and rewrote, I want to give you some numbers so you can have a sense of scale of the problem. Now, if we only look at how much more expensive a new car is, and ignore the extra hassle that these laws allow for, we get an increased cost per new car of $2,700. With the amount of money stolen from the American public as a whole totaling $47 billion in 2017 alone. And I don't want anyone to think that this is some kind of partisan issue, because it's really not. No matter what side of the political spectrum you fall under, you will find something in these laws that you can hate. I guarantee it. And in these hyper-divided times, I think a little exercise in national unity could be good for the nation. So everybody grab your shotguns, join me around this barrel, and let's have a little bit of fun. Back in the early days of cars, nobody had any idea how to sell a car. They were very expensive, difficult to transport, they didn't have the internet yet, they didn't know how to deal with them. But in the end, they did figure something out, and what they figured out was a dealership system, where the manufacturer didn't actually own the stores that their cars were being sold at. Instead, those stores would be owned by private investors who bought a franchise from the manufacturer. Now, this worked out pretty well until the Depression hit. The Depression was, in a word, depressing. So the manufacturers decided to cheer themselves up by putting the screws to their dealerships to wring out that little bit of extra money for themselves. Specifically, they started forcing their dealerships to buy more cars from them than they could actually sell. The dealerships had to put up with this because the only way they could get the products that they sold was through the manufacturers. And so by the time the 50s rolled around, we start seeing a lot of legislation designed to protect car dealership franchise owners. However, as we are going to see, these laws have gone so far in protecting the franchise owners that they are now actively hurting the manufacturer and the consumer while simultaneously preventing innovation and competition. The first of these laws that we're going to look at is the law that's on the books in pretty much all states that require all new car sales to be done through licensed dealerships. This means that, by law, you cannot sell multiple brands of cars in a single store, and manufacturers cannot sell to the consumer. Tesla specifically has been hit hard by these laws, as it sells directly to the consumer. In many states, Tesla has been forced to shut down their stores after lengthy legal battles. This means that legally, there is no competition allowed to the licensed car dealership model of selling and maintaining cars. No innovation can happen, and car dealerships are allowed to be inefficient because market forces are legally not allowed to act on them. The next set of laws we're going to talk about are the encroachment laws. These are laws that mandate that dealerships must be given exclusive territories where no other franchise owners are allowed to operate, the size of which is also usually mandated by law. Although, to be fair, there are arbitration boards that allow multiple dealerships from the same manufacturer to exist in the same market area in the case of good cause. But we're going to talk more about the arbitration boards a little bit later in the video. Now, these exclusive territories would likely still exist without these laws, as manufacturers don't want their own stores competing with their own stores. But the size of these exclusive areas would be determined in contract negotiations between the franchisor, the manufacturers, and the franchisees, the dealership owners. What these laws do is make it harder for manufacturers to adjust their dealership networks as markets change. And this creates inefficiency, which is passed on to the consumer in the form of higher prices, while the dealership owners enjoy their government-enforced monopolies. An interesting byproduct of these laws is that they also totally prevent the sale of cars online. Because if you sold new cars online, That would be infringing on every car dealership's exclusive territory in your entire state. And as we've seen in many other industries, the ability to shop and buy online in conjunction with cutting out the middleman has dramatically changed the game. The third set of laws we're going to talk about dictate when a manufacturer is allowed to close down a dealership. Now, these laws apply both to canceling a contract and failing to renew a contract. To terminate the dealership, the manufacturer has to demonstrate to a government arbitration board that it has good cause to do so. Often this good cause is defined as dealership insolvency, fraud, or a reasonable non-compliance with the franchisor agreement. Some things, however, that are often missing from this list include things like increased efficiency and increased manufacturer profit. Further, at these arbitration boards, the burden of proof is solely on the manufacturer, and the dealership must be given a period of time to let them fix the problem. All of this means that manufacturers can't reshape their dealership networks to better reflect the current market, and this leads to inefficiency and higher prices. Further, it makes it very difficult for bad dealerships to be shut down and replaced, which reduces the dealership incentive to provide good service. And even if the manufacturer is able to terminate a dealership, they'll run smack dab into the middle of the fourth set of laws we're going to talk about, the laws that determine manufacturer compensation to terminated dealerships. Most franchise laws require manufacturers to buy back all unsold new vehicles as well as parts, accessories, and special tools and equipment, while some states like Virginia have gone even further, requiring that the manufacturer who discontinues a brand and thus terminates all the dealerships associated with that brand pay the fair market value of the dealership plus 3 years of rent to the dealership and buy back all vehicles and equipment. For an example of how expensive terminating dealerships can be, GM apparently spent $1 billion to close more than 2,000 Oldsmobile dealerships, and you can bet that General Motors attempted to recoup those losses on the backs of the consumer. These laws also prevent the manufacturer from using the threat of termination to push dealerships to become better. The fifth set of laws go even further in restricting the manufacturer's ability to influence dealership behavior. Most states have laws against so-called quantity forcing, or the practice of forcing dealerships to purchase vehicles they have not ordered. This prevents manufacturers from forcing bad dealerships to become better by forcing them to move more product. This extra pressure would create an incentive to lower prices and provide better service, but it's a tool that is illegal for manufacturers to use. Another tool that's illegal to use is offering different prices to different dealerships in the same state or relevant market area. This shields smaller dealerships from larger ones by preventing larger dealerships from getting lower prices through economies of scale. In addition, it also prevents manufacturers from rewarding good dealerships with lower prices. Some states have resorted to a much more blatant level of theft. For example, Florida. In Florida, it is legal for manufacturers not to offer any incentives to dealerships that they offer to dealerships in other states, unless the manufacturer can demonstrate to a Florida-run arbitration board substantially different economic or market conditions. In addition, if the manufacturer offers a per-vehicle financial incentive to dealerships for facility improvements, Florida dealerships must be paid at least 80% of those incentives, even if they choose not to improve their facilities at all. That last one is basically pure theft, and the money that Florida dealerships steal is made from consumers all across the country. The final set of laws we're going to talk about dictate the price manufacturers have to pay dealerships for warranty repair work. State franchise law often mandates that the manufacturer compensates the dealership for warranty repair work, and it also tends to mandate the price. The prevailing formula is cost of parts plus 30 to 40%, but some states are beginning to mandate that the manufacturer pay the same amount as retail customers. Of course, provisions requiring payments at the level the consumer pays for warranty work not only increase the cost of doing business for manufacturers, but it also gives an incentive to dealerships to increase their list price for repairs. If warranty markups are high enough, they can allow what would normally be unprofitable dealerships to remain in business. The cost of these laws to consumers was estimated by a Goldman Sachs study from 2000. Now, don't ask me why Goldman Sachs decided to launch such a study, because I have no idea. But the study is talked about at length in a DoJ paper that I'll link below. The study found that the inefficiencies created by these laws increased the cost of a new car by about 8.6%. And in 2017, the cost of a new car was just over $31,000. So roughly, the cost per car was $2,700. NPR's Planet Money podcast also found a study that found an $1,800 price increase per car. So overall, we see roughly about a $2,000 to $3,000 increase in the price of a new car, with estimates for the cost of the whole nation at between $25 and $47 billion for 2017. To put those numbers in perspective, the budget of NASA in 2017 was $19.5 billion. Now, you'd think that these laws would harm all manufacturers equally, but you'd be wrong. American manufacturers are hurt more relative to foreign manufacturers. This is due to the timing of when the manufacturers built their dealership networks. Back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s, when American manufacturers were setting up their networks, there was less foreign competition. Foreign auto manufacturers became a major force in the US car market later, and this matters for two reasons. First, people don't really live in the same places they did in the 30s, 40s, and 50s. There have been large population shifts that change where the car buying public lives. But because of franchise law, American car manufacturers cannot adjust their dealership networks to match where consumers now live. Second, because the market share of American auto manufacturers have shrunk, they have less business per dealership than they used to, and can't shut down dealerships in response. Foreign manufacturers came in sooner to the present, and were able to establish fewer, more strategically located dealerships. And this makes their distribution system more efficient than American manufacturers. Look at this graph of the number of cars sold per franchise in 2008. Toyota sold over 3 times more cars per dealership than Ford did, meaning that Ford had to maintain 3 dealerships for every 1 dealership Toyota has to maintain. And the efficiency means higher prices, which means that Ford becomes less competitive relative to Toyota. There's an idea in economics called creative destruction. It's the idea that innovation destroys the old way of doing things in the process of making things better. Basically, that progress often is not pretty, and there are winners and losers. These car dealership laws stop this process in their industry. Inefficient car dealerships are not closed, and new, better methods of selling people cars are not allowed to spring up. In order to have progress and innovation, bad businesses have to be allowed to fail. What car dealerships have done is to shield themselves from the free market so they can charge higher prices, provide worse service, disadvantage American manufacturers, and generally make our economy more wasteful and less efficient.